Today on the Learn It, Use It podcast.
Those things you've learned in the intersection between EM and OM, what would be the top 2 or 3 things that you think has helped you drive through that nobody told you? You didn't get out of one of our textbooks or anything.
Right.
It's like, this was surprising to me.
I don't know that this is taught enough, but emotional intelligence is key to being successful. The higher your emotional intelligence, the better you can connect with people. And I use the term management. There's very few people in a management position, right? So whether in operations management, engineering management, like, you have to interface with other people. And if you don't know how to communicate, if you don't know how to listen, if you don't know how to think objectively, if you don't know how to have self-awareness, you will not be nearly as effective.
This podcast is by the Operations Management and Engineering Management programs in the College of Engineering at the University of Arkansas. In our programs, we stand by Learn It Today, Use It Tomorrow. The instructors for our courses are professionals with real-world experience where you will be able to immediately apply what you have learned. Today's workforce is changing rapidly, and all fields require adapting to new environments, which means you need new credentials quickly to improve your current performance. Our graduate programs and certificates apply to all industries so you can be competitive in today's workforce. In this episode, Dr. Rich Ham is joined by Josh Richards, COO at Game Composites, an aviation and aerospace components manufacturer in Bentonville, Arkansas. Josh's background is in highly regulated industries such as aerospace and nuclear power. Throughout the episode, Dr. Ham and Josh discuss the concepts of engineering and operations management in a three-dimensional environment, and how effective operational leadership isn't a linear chain of command structure, it's a balance of influence, negotiation, decisiveness, and patience.
Thank you, Karin, for that information and kind of setting the stage for us today on what we're going to discuss. I'm here today with Josh Richards, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Game Composites, which is an aircraft both manufacturing and design company here on Thaden Field in Bentonville. One of my favorite things to talk about, because I love aviation and how lucky you are to be there. Mm-hmm. What a great job. But it's very, very unique for us. Our two programs, the Master of Science in Engineering Management and the Master of Science in Operations Management, you're living those things every day. So that's what we're going to try to talk about. So, Josh, welcome, and thank you for giving your time for us to kind of discuss the issues around what the challenges that you face. Can you tell us first a little bit? Well, tell us some about both yourself and Game Composite, and some of our students out there going, wow, how can I find a job like that? So,
yeah. Well, so a little bit about me. I have a bit of a non-traditional background. So I grew up in Bentonville and decided pretty quick after graduating this wasn't the place for me, and joined the military. And after about 6 years, I got out and decided I needed some education, and I went to engineering school after the military. So graduated from Gonzaga with a degree in civil engineering, and then ended up working in the nuclear power industry for a while before getting into more of an operations management role in aerospace manufacturing, specifically in composites. So I worked for contract manufacturers, delivering products to tier one companies, Boeing, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, to name a few. And then when it was kind of time to, after working through a couple factories, I started looking for my next opportunity and was pleasantly surprised to find that there was an aircraft OEM here at Bentonville that didn't exist when I left 25 years before. So I never thought when I got an engineering degree that I would get into operations management. I had big dreams of working on civil projects, but just found a real niche and passion for manufacturing and the administration of a business and pushing it towards high levels of productivity and efficiency, managing money in a responsible way for the principals. So super excited to find myself back home, right, where I grew up.
Right.
So I've been at Game Composites for about 18 months now, and my job really encompasses administration of the business. The things I tend to stay away from and defer to our CEO and co-founder, Philip Steinbach, is highly technical matters. So he's a chief engineer and chief test pilot. So he designs them, he flies them, and then I kind of handle all the other stuff related to manufacturing operations. Little bit about Game Composites. Companies was formed about 10 years ago in the UK with the idea of becoming an aviation OEM, right? So they found a product that the two co-founders, Philip and Stuart Walton, were knowledgeable and passionate in, which is high performance and limited aerobatic aircraft. And they set off to design a better version of the mousetrap, for lack of a better term. Once they got through that design, a first flight was in 2015 of the GB-1 Gamebird, which we make now. They moved the company to Bentonville, Arkansas, and got our type certificate under Part 23 for the GB-1 Gamebird. And then in 2019, we got our production certificate and started delivering aircraft. Right now, we produce about 2 per month, so close to 24 per year. And we're getting ready to deliver number 66 right now. About, I'd say probably 18 months ago, 24 months ago, the company started down this path to figure out what is the next airplane. Because if it was just about making one type of aircraft, the juice wouldn't be worth the squeeze, right? And it didn't fit into the vision that the founders had for the company. So we've been working on that diligently. We're almost complete with the facility expansion, doubles our factory floor space, and we're pretty hot and heavy into design of that aircraft, which will use a lot of the same technologies that we have, which is, full aerospace composite construction for an aircraft. But that's kind of where we sit now. And a big part of my job, aside from day-to-day management, is figuring out how to organize the company and grow the company in all the right spots and all the right places at the right time. So a lot of it is like, trying to change a tire, trying to change oil as the car is going down the road. What moves do you make today that'll be beneficial in the long run? What moves do you want to hold back from, right? Knowing that, I can figure that out later. And so it's just having a giant puzzle on the table and figure out which corner you kind of want to start with and what to work on, which I think is really true to the spirit of both EM and OM for sure.
Right. Well, and so it's in a smaller company, like, just like you said, with this, the kind of intersection between EM and OM, that's a tricky place. It's kind of an interesting thing. And you tell me where I've got it right or wrong, but if you're at Boeing or Raytheon, or if you're at a place that's doing military, a lot of these do military and commercial large, but they've got like the EM department and the OM department. Like EM has their R&D functions, and they go through and they do validations, and they turn it over to OM to deliver. But when you're in a smaller company, the iterations of these processes kind of get, I don't know if blurry is the right word, but they kind of come together. Can you talk some about how tricky that is to deal with sometimes?
Yeah. So we try very hard to keep, some of these core functions separate or divorce as long as we can. Like, the initial stages of design for GB2, our next aircraft, we really wanted that to sit somewhere else so that we could gain enough traction and get enough movement and not be distracted by the day-to-day operation. So a really good example of that is the company hired me, right? So the CEO was doing a lot of the company type business and needed to focus more on the job of being a chief engineer, right? Because we all kind of wear multiple hats. So again, getting the right people in the right spot to sort of take on some responsibility where you can. But to your point about, product development, we're seeing that right now because we're starting to build tooling associated with it. And I'm having to manage resources that are producing aircraft that we sell and actually generate revenue versus this R&D function that right now is just an expense, right? I mean, it's a heavy expense on the company. And then being able to like mix the two for long enough to get the information you need, and then, like you said, kind of cycle back out and work on those separate things, and then come together again at a really basic level. I mean, we see that with how we manage our production schedule. So I've got, a few very large format CNC machines that I need them to cut tooling plugs, right, to prepare for GB2, but I also need them to cut composite items for GB1 and produce that. And so how do you assign priority, right? I've got this great product that I think is going to be this huge game changer for the company, but I can't just stop what I'm doing right over here because it's also a core function. And we have commitments to our customers over there. So there is a lot of balance back and forth. I see it mostly on the operations side because that's where I sort of live. But I also know when you have a really small agile team on the engineering side, and in our case, we're using some outside subject matter experts on the engineering front to design maybe systems or functions or do analysis on this new aircraft. How do you get all those pieces to sort of line up together that supports this greater schedule? And then, like I'm sure we'll get into, and then you sprinkle in some regulatory participation, and it is quite the job. It's very interesting to me. If I was in construction, I would never be the guy picking out the wallpaper color or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, where do we frame the wall? How do we pour the foundation? That sort of thing. So it's really fun for me.
Well, and that it leads us into a little bit of what you say too. All the things like the traditional OM things, when you're separate, that maybe is not necessarily the same. Would be like you mentioned some very specific machines. So you're talking about cutters, laser cut. I mean, cutters that are set up are different types of, and you have to deal with maintenance and reliability because. If Boeing has one go down, they typically have a spare. They've got some kind of, but smaller companies typically you live and die by the maintenance and reliability on those.
Right. Yeah, and it's part of the charm, I think. So it's a trade-off. Like, I worked for the Navy for a long time, huge organization. I was at a public shipyard with 17,000 people working there, and so processes are robust, lessons have already been learned, and there's this deep culture, right, of the established process, and then but it can feel very constrained and shackled, and you don't have the flexibility to move and to be agile, right? So you go to these larger companies and they have initiatives for agility and to quickly solve problems and move through things, right? 'Cause they have to make that a focus, whereas a small company, that is life. Right, is quick movement, agile thinking, quick, in some cases, isolated decision making that plays into the bigger picture. And so, to your point about, like OEE, right, overall equipment effectiveness, when I step into a company the size of Game Composites, just about 100 employees. And it's like, I feel like a time traveler to a certain extent because you're like, I know that we need to get this thing set up, and I know that we need to get this thing set up, and I know that we need to work on this. And you've got all of these different opportunities, right? Well, which one do you start working on? And how hard do you work on it before you move on to the next thing? And it's a very cyclic motion of, okay, we need to get some like basic equipment checklists and preventative maintenance scheduling set up for our core functions, right? Our core machines. I'm going to get it so that it serves a purpose and it at least mitigates my risk a certain percentage. And then I'm going to have to go work on something else, right? Knowing that maybe it's 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, I'm going to revisit that problem of overall equipment effectiveness. And I'm going to take my previous solution and add 15% to it or 20% to it. And that is like the best description, I think, of a daily cycle in operations management at a smaller company with a very clear mission, who have the vision is set up and the strategy is sort of set up, but now it's like you got everything you need, just go do it, right? And it's like,
right, yeah.
How do you, where do you start?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you've got a unique product, composites as an example. It's not like composites are brand new, but for a smaller company, that's typically starts out as kind of an artisan, but over time you want to scale that too. So there's challenges for that in workforce development and others.
Yeah.
And I know it has to be one of the things you think about all the time is development of people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, when I first stepped into my role here, I really did, I knew, workforce development is always a part of a leader's job within a company, whether you're a first level supervisor or whether you're a COO. But I've been surprised at how much effort I've had to put into it and how much time it consumes, and how important it is, right? Like, I spend my time doing the things that are most important. And workforce development is a huge thing, that we have to get right, because you can have the best factory in the world, you can have all the money in the world, you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have the people to make it happen, then you're doomed to fail. In aerospace composites, there is still an element that is rooted in a trade, a skilled craft. It's very, very difficult to automate, our standard style of layup. It's really hard to automate. You can do it, but it's going to cost you so much that you don't, it's cost prohibitive. And so you're right. You got to sort of build these skills and capabilities into your workforce. And then as opportunity presents itself to bring in more technology or automation, you can try it, but it's at such a scale that makes you not want to do it. Right. And I've definitely felt that. It's like, well, we could get some robots in here to sand some parts. And you're like, I don't know how much, I'm going to benefit from this, but you have to, part of engineering and operations leadership is having the foresight to look ahead and go, this is the right decision now, because I don't want to wait too long and get behind the power curve. But back on the workforce development side, I've spent more time talking to public education institutions, whether that be high schools here in the local area or the University of Arkansas, skill-based training programs and workforce development programs, just trying to be an advocate for what we need as an employer, and have been met with a ton of support, which is really nice.
Well, and it's something that if you're not thinking about it now, in 5 years you'll pay, right? You might kind of, for a small company, you can kind of survive for a little bit, but if you're not ready, if you're not thinking 5 years, who do you need? Because you need everybody. You need the people that have this skill of, I want to be the artisan, the trade, I want to do these pieces. You need operations managers, you need engineers, you need, the gambit of what you need there. Everything from, an aerospace engineer through aerospace tech, and then people that just want to maintain things. That's what their passion is. And so you're trying to build basically that whole thing at one place and then do it here. Luckily, it's a good place to attract people to, but it'd be good if we could build them here.
Right. And I think it's an important thing to talk about, because so the industry that I'm in, which is aerospace manufacturing, there's not a lot of that in Northwest Arkansas. We're 3.5 hours from Wichita, and you'd think that Wichita was on the West Coast. And it's really hard to break ground on a new ecosystem in a region that has such a history in other industries, right? Whether it be logistics, retail, or technology or whatever. And so getting people to realize that, number one, a career in manufacturing is a really great thing. You can start on the production floor and run the company one day, right? In manufacturing, that's always valued. But getting people to realize that that's hey, we're here. This is a great thing. You can have a great career in it. But yeah, we need a lot of people in all areas, for sure.
Well, and then to throw the mix into it, you've got a unique situation where you got the EM and OM, a smaller company trying to do it, and then you overlay, because so everybody, if you're building widgets, there are smaller companies that kind of have this,
Mm-hmm.
but what they don't have is the regulatory function, and rightfully so. I mean, aviation, the FAA has a mandate to make it safe, and that
Mm-hmm.
includes, but the constraints that are built into the process. Talk a little bit about the challenges, about how you meet those constraints,
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of things, the challenges that you find.
Right. So any highly regulated industry is rooted in technical compliance, right? I saw that when I was working in nuclear power, definitely in aviation as well. And so, I'd say at our core, we're an engineering-led organization, right? Maintaining strict control over design and authority is it's essential, right? And in the end, that sort of that built-in safety factor that comes through in product costs too, right? So you got to kind of look at it that way. Why are airplanes so expensive? Because they're highly regulated, is for one reason. So within within aviation, we have to. So everybody, like small company aviation, everybody wears a bunch of hats, right? But one hat that everybody has is quality management and quality assurance. And so we have to have people that have strong competencies and skills with quality management. Internal, for example, being really good at internal auditing and compliance, having a strong self-assessment mindset, right? That's definitely something that's rooted through highly regulated industries. The last thing you want is your regulator to tell you you're wrong, right? You want to tell your regulator that you found out you're wrong before they do. Right. And if you have that mindset, you're going to solve problems really early and often when they're small, right? Because you want to solve small problems, not solve big problems when it comes to safety and quality of product. So it's definitely an issue that you have to factor into how fast you can make something, how fast you can design something. For example, on our new aircraft, we have to have an extremely strong and deep partnership with the FAA, who is, our regulatory authority, on what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. We have to be very open and honest about our own activities, and we have to be very open about the input that they provide if we want to make it work. And that poses, like I said, it poses a lot of challenges. It's part of the business, but if you're not thinking, in the terms of like new product development or new product integration, if you're not factoring in that time and costs associated with working through your compliance issues, you're going to fail. And I think people get really frustrated at that. Why is this taking so long? Why is this costing so much money? But in the end, if you make a superior product that's extremely safe, then you're only going to cry once, right? Like through that initial sort of pain of development to get it right, because the last thing you want to do is make a mistake that your customer ultimately pays for. And in our business, that mistake can be the cost of their lives, right?
So you said something in the QA that's an aviation with the implementation of mandated safety management systems or security management systems and others and the requirements now. But you said something, I think, so my experience, I led a regulatory agency. We literally at the school for the regulators would talk about if they had a SMS, a safety management system, or SEMS certification, then you would start the if it's an audit or whatever, and say, show me your file. And if what you wanted to see, what the regulator wanted to see is, here's the binder since you were here 3 months ago of what we discovered and the solutions we fixed. But if that's what you saw, you had a good feeling about it. And the regulator, and it kind of changed the way they looked. But when you walked in and they said, oh yeah, we found this one problem, then the regulator's going to dig really deep because they know that can't be true. But it is culturally, it's counterintuitive to always be reporting on your own problems, but it's necessary to the system. So has that culture been in it? If you had an issue getting your own people to say, hey, look, no, it's good for us to record what we did.
Oh, it's definitely a part of the job to get people that are new to the industry. And again, because we're kind of this new industry in Northwest Arkansas, so to speak, right? I know there's other people that do our business, but we definitely feel like we're kind of new here. You're bringing people in at all different levels, and from a very early stage, you're trying to get them to understand what that culture is, and that it is funny because there's resistance for people to, to number one, admit mistakes, right? Like, I really could have done this differently. I really overlooked this thing. Here's the root cause as I see it, and these are the actions I'm going to put in place to try to prevent that reoccurrence. Like that, you're exactly right. That like frame of mind for some folks is it's really complicated to wrap their brain around. But it has to start from day one in our business. That's like, look, if you don't like people watching what you do, and you don't like people critiquing how you do it, and you don't like being asked, tough questions, then there's lots of other places you can go work. This is not going to be one of them, because you just can't have it. You can't have people that have the thought that they need to hide mistakes, right? So that also applies not only on the people actually producing goods, right? Changing form, fit, and function of things, the actual surgeons in the room, but it's also the leadership. Operation and engineering leadership has to have the right mentality for solving problems that doesn't come across as so penalizing to people, right? So it's very easy to get upset when somebody makes a mistake or somebody has an oversight, or you have something that you would consider to be catastrophic. But how you react to that problem is just as important sometimes as the problem itself. And so it's a tough lesson to learn. I spend a lot of my time trying to coach people on what I hate this term, but it's like, what's the right way of thinking, right? And you just got to have a really open mind and have a real mindset of self-assessment, I think, to be really successful and to produce a safe product. But it's not something that comes naturally for some folks, and we see that.
It's like all the ISO operation, all the things when you're doing internal piece, but aviation has, even as a pilot, it doesn't matter how many hours you could be the chief pilot at American Airlines still gets evaluated.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's still looking at him or her every 6 months and then giving them a critique on their landings and the rest. And so that whole aviation idea of being able to take it's tough because it's not intuitive for people. So I know it's a leadership challenge, and I think you did a good job of telling us that.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit. I want to come back a minute to the workforce development. I know that you'd worked a course with U of A, and the idea being to start down this path. Are there other things that you've tried? So you're always looking to develop the workforce, but things about recruiting, things in the area of where you'd see if you were going to say, hey, here's the list. Here's what I need. I need A&Ps, or I need what is it? Who is it you need? And which one do you think is the biggest challenge now?
Yeah. So we'll so just to take a step back, just to explain a little bit of what I did with the University of Arkansas, right? So develop some online pre-apprenticeship style courses, right, that just present some fundamentals in advanced manufacturing concepts, and then a second course related to aerospace composites. I think, when it comes to actually making the aircraft and making the parts that support it, like our company, like others, does a really good job of figuring out how to teach people to do that, right? Like, here's the technique that you use to do this thing. But I think where the gap is, and this is what can take a long time, and that employers aren't intuitively prepared to handle, is sort of the background of that, like the background of the industry and the techniques before the employee gets there is what I'm trying to say. I think having people, especially especially some of the youth coming into the workforce, right? So graduating high school seniors or people that are early on into their first career, getting them to understand how honestly the physical world works is really, it can be a real challenge sometimes. And, I won't get on too much of a soapbox on my own opinion on why, students are kind of coming out that way, but I think it's just a gap that we see. You bring somebody in, and I think 20 years ago, you could take somebody from around here and you could give them a hand tool, and they'd probably already seen it or used it to some degree. But now, we have people that like, well, how do you use a drill, for example? Now that same person may be able to code, right? Or to do some sort of computer programming or whatever. But we still have skills that require, that knowledge of how things sort of work. So I think it's important that we put mechanisms in place at the right stage for people to be successful coming into a manufacturing type career. And then once they're within my walls, right, then it's up to me to figure out how best to develop them so that they're engaged. I can retain them, right? They feel like they're a part of the culture and the company's success and some other things. At a previous company I used to work for, we created a nationally certified apprenticeship program for industrial manufacturing technicians. So like a 3,000-hour course where they're paid on the job, and then the company also paid for their college credits that work towards that apprenticeship. At Game Composites, we'll end up doing the same thing. I got again, it's like, what problem do I need to work on now, and who do I have in place that can help shepherd that forward? But we'll end up doing the same thing, so that people can see that you don't necessarily have to go straight into college to have a good paying, meaningful type career. And there may be opportunities for you to go to college at a different stage. Like I shared my story, I started engineering school when I was 27, right? And so, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I think as a region and a community, society in general, we need to make sure that there's a framework for people to be successful and to have a diverse set of experiences before they really get into the workforce. And then once they're there, support them on many different paths. And I think most employers see that, right? They like, for me, will happily pay for an employee to upskill, right? Or to reskill or to do whatever. It's just, are the resources and is the system in place to support that is part of the question.
So that's an interesting, so I, for lack of a better term, say these common skills people came out with. So if you asked, not scientifically, but like you said, if you asked high school juniors, you change the oil on your car, why would I do that? I can go to Walmart,
right.
And it didn't cost me hardly any more anyway, or change a flat. When I was a kid, flats were really common. You had to, because it happened all the time. When you did, it was out in the middle of nowhere if you lived in rural Arkansas. So, but these common skills about using tools and the like, it's almost like you're describing. You have to have like leveling courses to bring them up to a point that you normally, if you're going to bring them into manufacturing, do that so they can learn these kind of basic skill sets.
Right. And Rich, we even do that with our new engineers. We got plenty of I would say recent engineering graduates, so 4 years or less, right? Not quite to the journeyman level of engineering. And it doesn't matter where they come from. Their first 2 to 4 months is spent on the production floor making parts. Because it's like, if you're going to tell this team of folks how to fix something or how to make something, you better have a good idea of how to do it too. But it's extremely beneficial, because I don't think, and this is not a knock on any specific program, I just think that, the better we can blend technical and non-technical training sort of together so that we have a good understanding of how the world works, the more impact they're going to have right out of the gate, for sure.
So that is a great, what a great practice, because it has to help your workforce if they've seen the engineers there, that they know they're speaking from some experience as opposed, because, I live in a world of engineers, and they sometimes have a tendency to say, do it this way, and you're like, well, why don't you come do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, it has to be a great culturally.
Yeah. No, it is. So our production technicians and our, manufacturing leadership see that, right? That they're reporting on the same shift, and they're assigned to a team, and they're going through and they're making mistakes, and they're learning from it. So there's a bit of rapport that gets built there too. So, so a better technical understanding of our products and our processes. They get to build rapport with the people that they're going to end up working with, because the one thing we can't have is a hard division between, technical authority, which is our, call it our engineering team, and then as I said before, the surgeons in the room, right? And those are conversations I have with every engineer that comes into our office or comes into our companies to say, let's talk about where you are on the food chain, right. Real quick. So they are the only ones that change form, fit, or function and drive an appreciable benefit to the bottom line of the company, right? Our manufacturing technicians, the direct labor. You're a support function to them. Right. Your job is to make their job as easy as possible with as few errors as possible, right? At a high quality, on and on and on. And it's kind of funny to see, especially younger engineers, they're like, oh, wow, that's not what, that's not what I thought this was going to be. And they all get on board with it, but it's key in operations management to get people to understand kind of, how the world works, right, within those walls, and what the narrative really is, right?
Yeah, it's not like that at Boeing. So there are some things advantage culturally though when you're doing it, but certainly it would seem that it helps you. You don't end up with the engineers providing a solution, then it gets to the floor and they're told that will never work.
Right.
That machine won't do it that way.
Right.
It can't happen. So that's a great thing. So so you're looking towards the future.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see, whether it's aircraft or 5 years down the road, which can seem like it goes really fast, or it can seem like
it does nowadays.
Yeah, it's moving really fast, but at the same time, sometimes it might feel like dog years when you look back too.
Yeah.
But when you're in this kind of a, almost an incubator, not quite startup, but almost like startup, and in that mentality. So what do you see in 5 years? If you had a crystal ball and you said, I think in 5 years, this is where we'll be.
Yeah. So for Game Composites specifically, yeah. So definitely in the next 5 years, we'll have another aircraft to market, right? So working through that design and certification, which we talked about a little bit, that takes years to get through. Hopefully we can get through it in the next 3 years, maybe stretch a little bit longer than that, but we will already be into production on our next aircraft. So we'll still likely maintain the aircraft that we currently have, the Game Bird. It's part of our DNA. I mean, it's like the spirit of that machine.
It's a nice airplane.
It's super fun. So we'll still have that, but we'll have this other product. We will probably be looking at, if we hadn't already started at this point, do we have enough room to make, GB2 or the next aircraft at the production that we want, at the rate that the market will demand? And then I would say the third prong of that we will probably be already working on the design for another aircraft at that point. So I think it's important for a company like us to continue to have a passion of product development and growth, and to not, put it into kind of a cruise control mode or an autopilot that, it's in our spirit to design and create and innovate. And so we need to ensure that we continue to do that, and that we always have functions that are focused on that, research and development and like what's the next thing. I would hope from, say, an employee side, I would hope that there's a much deeper understanding within the community of what aviation and aerospace manufacturing is and what we do, how it can be a really awesome career. I've shared the story with people. I lived in Seattle for almost 9 years. And when you go to Seattle, people understand that like you can go build airplanes and have a really good life because your dad or your uncle or your best friend's parents, they all worked at Boeing, and they all worked for a company that supplied aerospace components. And they see that as like I could do that, and that's meaningful work, and they get paid well, and it's a good life. It's not this, working in a coal mine type mentality. And so I would hope that the community has sort of embraced our brand of manufacturing and innovation at Game Composites, and that it's become a lot easier to find the right talent at the right levels, right? So we're not having to continue to bring in people with no aerospace experience. And I think the region is preparing for that. I think the region is preparing to diversify the economic, ecosystem, for lack of a better term. So I'm optimistic with that, but yeah.
So it's interesting because what you is exactly spot on. You mentioned that in Northwest Arkansas. So in the state of Arkansas, aerospace is the number one export. It's not, everybody, if you everybody, anybody else normally would say, oh, it's soybeans, or rice. No, it's aerospace by far. But Northwest Arkansas, not so much. Engine manufacturer here, there, a couple of small components places, but nothing like, Dassault in Little Rock or Raytheon or those, those kind of historic companies, or in South Arkansas. But it's kind of a game changer as far as aerospace in this area. If you're looking for the biggest challenge, so you've looked 5 years where you kind of think Game Composites, what do you think the biggest challenge with that in sight, that in view, that idea, will be for Northwest Arkansas to meet the challenge? I know I'm on the airport board, and I'm looking at, we're running out of space.
Yeah.
And so that would be what we would say, we need to make some plans about how do we expand, or second tiers and others. But for the industry in general, what do you see as the biggest challenge?
Yeah. So really good question. So I think all of the core community economic drivers, affordable housing, right, logistics and transportation, traffic, right, being able to get to a job, having the resources that you need, ensuring that we continue to push down the path of having good school districts in Northwest Arkansas, and all that stays the same. I think from a business side, for me, one of the challenges that I think we need to meet as a region is there's some work that I wouldn't say work, but I've had a lot of conversations and ran my mouth a lot about the need for more regional economic development as it relates to aerospace. So think of it as a regional center of excellence, or a corridor of businesses that are focused somewhat in the same genre, right? So if I, look at Wichita, for example. Wichita's bread and butter is aerospace, and there are a ton of aerospace companies there. And it's really easy for them to retain talent because, an engineer, for example, can go work at aerospace company A. And then if that doesn't work out, or they don't like it, or they want some other challenge, they don't have to sell their house and move their kids to a different school to go to aerospace company B. And so right now, a big challenge is for me to get in experienced technical talent, right? I'm having to import that because it just doesn't exist here. And one of the barriers is like, well, you're kind of the only show in town. So, right. I would have to move, and if something did happen, I'd have to, maybe change industries or move again. So I think deepening this region economically within advanced manufacturing, I won't even say aerospace, but just advanced manufacturing concepts, I think will be for the benefit of all, right? I shouldn't have to, for example, we try to we're trying to vertically integrate as best we can on our supply chain when we were opening up a new machine shop, buying a bunch of new machines, trying to introduce welding into our processes. But I'm still going to have suppliers and outside processors to support my business. There's no reason I need to send things to Dallas to get worked on, right? Like plating, for example, or, we still continue to buy products from overseas, right? That are difficult to get here. So some of our raw materials like carbon fiber and fiberglass fabric, resin systems, coatings, for just to name a few. So the more companies that sort of focus on the same sort of products and support each other, the better it is for all, I think, in the end, is what I'm trying to get across. And so that's what I would say would be a cautionary tale, that we should be looking at that. And I know there's people within the state and within the region, particularly between Arkansas and Oklahoma, that are thinking that way, right? And starting to look at other models that exist in different regions. When I lived in Eastern Washington, I worked at a factory in North Idaho, and there's they call it the I-90 aerospace corridor, right? So there's nonprofits or economic development initiatives and institutions that are focused on getting like-minded companies within the same sort of 150-mile region so that they can support each other and really build an ecosystem. And we need to be looking at doing the same thing here as it relates to Northwest Arkansas, right? Northwest Arkansas, Southwest Missouri, Northeast Oklahoma, even down towards the River Valley in Fort Smith. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, for sure.
So it's a great point, because if you think of all the things, plating for manufacturing, but if you even think about having an avionics shop that's close nearby. Right now, if you got to go to Fort Smith, the way it is right now, right? So having an avionics shop or having all these associated businesses that are close. And I think people sometimes miss that, just like you said, that the ecosystem or infrastructure that's required, you need to have several that are doing it. So let me shift gears on you then and get your take. So clearly, my view, you tell me if you think I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
But when it comes to the eVTOLs that are going through certification already, their manufacturing process is closer to what you're doing than others. Composites largely, even though they have batteries and the rest, but a lot of that process actually looks somewhat similar. I mean, because they're doing composite manufacturing and doing them one or two at a time. So if we looked over time at, hey, could we attract some of those people here? What do you think we're missing? The same thing about the ecosystem, or do you think we're missing? Because, I look at, Canoe's here. We've got some of the pieces about that autonomy and some of those that need to be here. But that includes not just avionics, but autonomous programming, coding, and the rest. What do you think's missing for that? If one was to come today, let's say one of the eVTOLs said, "Hey, Josh, we're thinking about coming down there and looking." What advice would you have for them?
Probably some of the stuff that we've already covered. Like I said, the people side of running a business is it cannot be underwhelmed. Like, it is so much work, and it's the right kind of work. It's just, I think for, especially since this podcast is focused on, engineering and operations management, it's just one of the things that you just can't underwhelm. Like, you got to put focus into it. If you're not willing to engage with the community and leaders within the community like yourself to say, look, this is what I need to be successful. I'm here to tell you, like, we need people with certain skills. We need, folks to be able to use their hands, or we need we need folks that function in a more technical capacity to have more practical skills, or whatever it is. You better be prepared to engage with the community on that if you want to be successful. It's very easy to sit back and go, well, there's no people here that have the skills that we need. Woe is me. But like that's why I spend a lot of time doing stuff like this, which is important. I think there's the nice thing about Northwest Arkansas, if another company was to come here, is there's a ton of support. Like, there's a lot of really smart people in great leadership positions that have their eyes really wide open and their ears wide open and their mouths, in the right position. So they're curious. What do we need to be successful? How can I help? They're making connections, like for me in general, to be successful. Part of it is just a time and maturation process, right? Like, it's a long game to grow a company. It's kind of scary because I look at, if the next product that we make does what we want it to do in the time frame we want it to do it, then I'm going to have a real problem, right? With having enough hands to be able to support these processes and make these products. But I think it's a great region. I think it's very balanced, right, so to speak. I've worked in the Pacific Northwest, and sometimes the climate can feel very unbalanced. But this is, I would definitely say this is a business first region, right? And we see that support. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does, and because I know the same thing. I mean, in some of the circles I see people trying to solve them. It's not like they're easy to solve, and it's not like they get solved in the next month.
right.
I mean, some of it's even basic. Do we have enough power there?
Mm-hmm.
Is there enough electricity to run this? Or if an eVTOL came in and wanted to charge, do we have enough to charge 10 at a time, 10 aircraft at a time? Do we have power and, water and all the infrastructure, the typical things we would, in addition to workforce and affordable housing too?
Mm-hmm. It's true. And the logistics of getting to and from work cannot be underwhelmed. We've had several like really good employees that they live maybe on the east side of Springdale, for example, and they're going, Josh, it takes me almost an hour to get to work. And, when you're just starting out in an industry and you're not, you don't have a ton of experience, so your wages aren't too high right out of the gate, like that can be a deal killer for them, and they'll stay somewhere closer to home. So I think where the business is located is really important as you sort of, if you're trying to start a new business or you're moving a business to Northwest Arkansas, understanding the dynamics of where people live, how traffic flows, what's coming down the pipe to improve that, is an important thing to think about, for sure.
Like the new 412 North
right.
bypass, right?
Right.
What a deal changer that would be, because there's no good way to get the east side of Springdale now. So.
Oh no, and like I remember growing up here. I mean, going to Siloam Springs was like, may as well have been driving to Fort Smith, right? It just seems so far away, but we have plenty of people that, work in Siloam Springs or live in Siloam Springs and work for us. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic to look at, because your ability to retain, especially like, the key folks that really make an impact on your business, getting them to be able to arrive at your place of employment, it's an important thing to factor in for sure. For us, we need to be attached to an airport. We produce airplanes. We test fly them right out of our, it gets right off the assembly line and rolls out on the apron, taxis right to the runway and takes off here at VBT. So we're somewhat limited in that case on where we can physically be located. Other companies may have a little more flexibility, but it's something they should look at.
So I know sometimes it looks like we made a circle around, but we look at like in OM, the OM decisions we're talking about, HR and layout design, all the things you've talked about. How do we do layout? How do I train people? All those, we call them the 10 OM decisions. And we have a corollary, kind of a parallel in EM. So as we kind of come back to where we started after we covered a lot of ground, but the EM-OM interface, tell me, you've already told us a little bit about, hey, we basically, when you're small, everybody does everything, and some of the things that you've done that have been, I would call them best practices. The thing with the engineers is a best practice, no doubt. I think, and it clearly is providing benefits. But if you were to think about those things you've learned in the intersection between EM and OM, what would be the top 2 or 3 things that you think has helped you drive through that nobody told you? You didn't get out of one of our textbooks or anything, but it's like, this was surprising to me that this was that important, about how we interface those two things. Like, where do we decide when it moves from one to the other? Because we've made a delineation. When do we just decide how the interface and how we put those together?
Yeah. Really good question. I feel like we could go for a while on this one. I would say, just in general practice, where operations management, engineering management, how they sort of intersect, First thing that when you first asked that question, number one thing that came to mind was, I think it's really important, and I didn't learn this until much later in my operations management career, that you have got to carve time for strategy. It is so easy. I tell people that are new to manufacturing, manufacturing is a meat grinder, right? So when I worked for the Navy, we were doing nuclear maintenance on aircraft carriers, and it had a defined project, right? It followed a typical phased gate project approach where you're in planning, pre-planning, planning, execution, whatever. But there was a day on the calendar that you could circle and say, project is done, right? And you could kind of celebrate that. In manufacturing, there is no project end date, right? It is a constant churn. It can feel from an operations management point of view like a constant churn that never ever stops. And so what I tell my production leaders, or really any leaders within the company that I'm at, is that you have to carve out time for strategy. You have to make it a priority to work on those tier 2 things, right? So the things that are not necessarily urgent, but they're important, right? If you don't make time for that, you're going to fall behind and you're going to fail. If you're only making tactical decisions, you're selling yourself short, right? And you're selling your company short. So number one, strategy. Nobody told me that, right? Because I'm the type of person where it's like, what are the rules of the game and how do you win? Okay, I'm going to go try to win, right? Boom, 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 boom. But I've learned as I've gained experience that that is such a core and important function to do that. Recently, it was actually earlier this week, some of our board of directors and leadership within my company, it just turned out to be an all-day strategy session. It was talking 3 to 10 years into the future. That's all it was about. And it was one of the best days I'd had in weeks, because it was using a different muscle in your brain, so to speak. But out of that, there were so many good things that helped clear the fog a little bit from the day-to-day tactical management of a company or an operation or a project. So number one, strategy. Number two, I don't know that this is taught enough, but emotional intelligence is key to being successful. The higher your emotional intelligence, the better you can connect with people. And I use the term management. There's very few people in a management position, right? So whether in operations management, engineering management, you have to interface with other people. And if you don't know how to communicate, if you don't know how to listen, if you don't know how to think objectively, if you don't know how to have self-awareness, you will not be nearly as effective otherwise. And so that would definitely be one. I'd be remiss if I didn't, bring up systems thinking, right? And again, it can come into play with strategy, but having a real deep understanding about how the nodes of our network are sort of connected within a system is really important, especially as a younger company. As I look at how we establish processes and procedures and how our different departments that are all kind of new interact and work together, understanding on a business system side, right? Not necessarily like a product system side, is really important too.
Those are great.
Yeah, I think that
you just gave some great points, because we have a strategic course, and in that course we talk about, because sometimes the question is that you always have to be asking, okay, I had this mission and vision statement, and so we can do it, but often we don't say, but should we do it? Is it really our core?
Mm-hmm.
And you can think of, in aviation, you can think of Southwest is a great example, right? There's in a SWOT analysis, number one thing that they had, two things that they had always. They pre-bought fuel, so they didn't get caught into that mess, right? And they had one platform.
Yep.
737s. Then they start trying to buy AirTrans and some of these others, and they got 717s and others in the mix, and everything starts to. So.
Yeah. Do you guys? So in your guys' course, course of study is Jim Collins' book, Great by Choice, something that's brought up?
It's not,
I
but we have some instructors that do it.
Right. So what you're talking about, like with Southwest specifically, it comes up in that book, and it's probably where we're both aligned on it. And he also talks about Stryker, about like intentional strategic development, right? So like looking at what the vision is and ensuring that the decisions that you're making support that. And it's very easy to get distracted, right? To look at the shiny thing or to make a snap decision. You get a couple wins under your belt, in operations management, and you start to get a little confident, right? And you make decisions faster and faster and faster. And then eventually you fail or make a mistake, and that sort of recalibrates you. But that consistent intentional growth, right, towards the vision is really important. Like,
yeah, it's so easy. I mean, so the great, and to kind of wrap us up, when I was an air traffic controller, we would vector people around, and I remember one of the early days when I was training, he said, something, when if you miss that vector by 2 degrees because you didn't account for wind or something else, it's no big deal in 5 miles, but in 100 miles, they're 50 miles off.
Right. Yeah.
So they're like, it's the 50, more like 14 point something. But anyway, the point is that, early on, the little thing, you could make little course adjust, but if you let it go and never get back to the path, then it's
yeah. In the book, Tuo Takata, they talk about the true north, right? And the other thing I would say about I feel it's very true in manufacturing. I'm sure it's relatable to many different industries, but so you have this vision of what success is or excellence is or where you want to be, and it falls under this sort of true north mindset, and you have to be making constant incremental adjustments to get in line with that true north. And that the moment that you stop working on something, there's process degradation, right? So it's like, it's very hard for people because we're all like, we want to solve a problem, right? And we want to solve it once, and we want to never deal with the problem again, right? But you can't do that in operations management. It's like you work on something and you establish, what you think is a robust process so that it doesn't degrade. But the second you take your eyes off on it, it's already slowing down and falling backwards. And so keeping an eye on that true north and making sure you're corralling all these different elements that are key to your job, and they're moving that direction it's really important.
Well, Josh, I can't thank you enough for taking this time. We're already, in fact, I think I might have kept you overtime. So, but the perspective is so great for our students. Even students we have that are doing, some EM and OM. Some have an OM degree, find themselves doing EM and come back, some EM and vice versa. And so your perspective, I think, is very important for students or prospective students. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah,
So.
It shows.
Yeah.
All right, so Karin, I will give it back to you to wrap up, and that'll be the conclusion of our podcast this month. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Before you go, if you enjoyed today's conversations, would you mind leaving us a review on whatever podcast platform that you're listening on? Our goal is education and helping people improve their professional skills and knowledge to advance in their careers, and positive reviews help others learn about our programs. Thanks, and we'll catch you on the next episode.